Hello, welcome everyone. Go ahead, make yourself comfortable. Get started in just a minute. If you don't mind popping something in the chat so we know this is actually working, would very much appreciate that. Leah, everything looking good on your end?
Yeah, all good over here. I'm excited to get started.
Great. So while everyone's kind of trickling in, hey, Christina, okay, great, it's working. That's good news. Yeah, so today we're excited to talk about KPIs and how tracking the wrong metrics might be getting in your way. My name's Ben Swafford. I'm product manager and UX strategist at Forefront. I'll be the background guy, fielding questions, and I'll pop in at the end to kind of wrap it up. But Leah's going to be the star of this show. If you don't know about Forefront, we are a digital marketing agency. We use data analytics to deliver impact for our clients. We specialize in SEO, paid ads, everything digital marketing. We're really good at analytics. And Leah is integrated digital marketing specialist at Forefront, and she combines a lot of expertise and experience in SEO, social media marketing, paid ads, really everything digital to help her clients thrive online. And yeah, I think with that, I'll pass it over to you. You ready, Leah?
All set. Thank you so much for that introduction, Ben. All right. Thanks everyone for being here. Just to give you a heads up of how this is all going to go, I expect to talk for, 20 to 30 minutes, and then I've got time to take questions at the end. But if you need to get back to your day, please feel free to jump. Also, one other thing I want to get ahead of before we get started. I share my office with 2 pet pigeons who normally are very quiet and well behaved, but as soon as we went live, they started flying around. So if you see something weird or you hear a weird noise, that's what's going on, and I apologize in advance for that. So let's go ahead and get started. Like Ben said, today we're going to be talking about KPIs and how tracking the wrong KPIs can actually really get in your way. So if you're in a position where your marketing team is busy, you're working hard, you're doing a lot of great work, but nothing is really feeling better inside of your business as a result of that work, it could be that you're measuring motion and not momentum. And that's what we're here to talk about and help you fix today. To be honest, this session might make you a little bit uncomfortable. I'm not here to say to validate your dashboards or tell you you're doing great. I'm here to show you why hitting your targets, why the targets you set might actually be the problem. So I'm going to go ahead and put up a poll. Give me 1 second. How confident are you that you are, hang on 1 second. There we go. There's that poll. How confident are you that what you're measuring, that your current KPIs actually predict business outcomes? So you should be able to, something should pop up. You should be able to answer that. Let's see how everyone's feeling today. Give it a couple seconds. All right. Somewhat confident. Okay. So it seems like some folks here might be making decisions in the dark. And that's not a personal failure. It's a systemic problem. If you're feeling very confident in your metrics, I want to kind of put those to the test. By the end of this session today, we'll have run your KPIs through a few different filters. And my guess is that at least half of your current KPIs won't actually pass the test. So let me go ahead and get rid of this poll here. All right. So we're going to start at Q1, the Q1 lock-in problem. So Q1 is when you or your leadership team quietly make a 12-month bet about which metrics are going to matter. You might sit in a planning meeting. Someone proposes tracking leads or content downloads or impressions. And because no one wants to slow things down, everyone nods and that's put into place. And then those metrics get locked into your system, into your dashboards, into your quarterly reviews. And for the next 12 months, every strategy gets judged by whether it moves those specific numbers. So your budgets flow to the tactics that hit those targets, and your teams protect the strategies that show progress there. But if the metrics you picked in Q1 were wrong, you just funded a year of work that doesn't actually move your business forward. So this might feel uncomfortably familiar. So let's say all year long, you're hitting every marketing KPI. Your leads are up 35%. Your content downloads are up 40%. Your email engagement is up 22%. Every quarterly review, it looks like a success story. But then at the end of the year, you realize revenue declined 22%, not because your team wasn't working, but because the metrics they were optimizing for had no real correlation to customer acquisition. So you're measuring activity that feels productive but doesn't actually predict outcomes. Here's an example of what that might look like. This is something we see over and over. So you start at the top. Your wrong metrics get chosen in Q1, usually because they're easy to measure, or that's what you measured last year, or they're inherited from a previous team. So then you set the budgets that fund the work that move those metrics. The work isn't wrong, but the target is. And then your teams protect the strategies that hit the numbers. When someone questions a tactic, they say, well, look, we're up 30%. And then somewhere around the middle of the year, leadership starts losing confidence because even though the numbers look good, nothing actually feels better inside of the business. Revenue isn't growing, your salespeople aren't happier, and perhaps the CEO starts asking some uncomfortable questions. But then next Q1, you're back to the top, you do it again. Maybe there are new metrics, but it might be the same pattern. And so the metrics you choose really determine which strategies survive and which ones get killed, even when the strategies work or don't work. So let's talk a little bit about inputs, outputs, and outcomes. Most reporting failures start with category confusion around those three things. We throw inputs, outputs, and outcomes into the same dashboard and treat them like they're all equally meaningful, but they're not. And let me show you the difference. So inputs are what you do, what your team does. Campaigns you launched, content you published, ads you're running. These things measure effort. Outputs are what you produce. So clicks, impressions, form fills, downloads. These measure activity. And outcomes are what actually changes in your business. Revenue, enrollment, new customers, contract value. These measure impact. And here's the problem. Inputs and outputs are easy to measure because that's what your team is doing. They go up easily. Outcomes are often a lot harder to measure, and they don't move unless something actually worked. So your team might end up reporting inputs and outputs because those are the numbers they have, and they show that they've been busy. And maybe they mention outcomes occasionally when they have those data and they happen to be good. So you might end up with a dashboard that looks something like this. You mix all three in one report and everything kind of looks connected. So you published 12 blog posts, you got 50,000 page views, and revenue went up 8%. When those are combined in the same report, they feel causally related. But what if that revenue came from a trade show and not from the blog posts? Or what if those page views were from existing customers, looking for answers and not from new prospects? The dashboard doesn't tell you. It just shows you three numbers trending up, and your brain kind of fills in the connection. It's not lying, but it's not a real picture of what's actually happening either. So let's talk about when good metrics get misrepresented. They're not bad metrics. They are useful when you understand what they measure and what they don't. The problem is when you ask metrics to predict things that they can't predict, or when you report them as if they're outcomes when they're really just signals. So a good example here is clicks and impressions. So clicks and impressions are visibility and interest metrics. In SEO, they tell you whether people are finding you and whether your content is resonating enough to click. That's valuable information. The problem happens when organizations treat those as outcome metrics. When someone says, well, we got 500,000 impressions this month, and maybe leadership hears, oh, we drove significant business impact, but that's not actually what those numbers are saying. Impressions tell you about reach and visibility. Clicks tell you about initial interest, but neither one tells you what happened next. Did those clicks actually convert? Did they fill out a form? Did that visibility reach the right audience? Without some additional context, you're measuring the top of the funnel and calling it success. So in SEO, we track clicks and impressions because they're leading indicators. They help us understand search visibility and content performance, but we don't optimize for them in a vacuum, in isolation. And we don't report on them as if they predict revenue. They're diagnostic metrics, not outcome metrics. Another one that might feel a little tricky is conversions. So what about those leads that never actually become customers? Or downloads that are never opened? They don't actually serve the purpose of like warming up your audience at all. Or form fills that are from competitors doing research or students writing papers or from spam bots, which has been happening more and more recently. So this is where we get into that conversation that nobody wants to have about lead quality. Maybe your marketing team says, we delivered 500 leads this quarter. And your salesperson says, well, none of them were qualified. And marketing says, well, they met the scoring criteria. And sales says, well, those criteria are wrong. And unfortunately, everybody's right. So the leads technically meet the definition. They did the thing you're asking them to do on your website, but that definition doesn't predict who actually becomes a customer. So you end up in this kind of absurd situation where your marketing team is hitting the targets and your sales team is still starving for qualified opportunities. And then we've got engagement metrics. So maybe you're measuring time on site without conversion context. Is someone spending 3 minutes on your pricing page because they're interested or because your page is confusing? Or pages per session. Are they clicking through your content because it's compelling and they're really engaged? Or are they lost and clicking desperately trying to find the information they need? Or social shares that don't generate any traffic. Someone retweeted you. Great. Did anyone click? Did anyone convert? If not, what did that share actually accomplish for you? So these metrics go up and down pretty easily. They look good in reports, but they rarely actually predict revenue. The pattern is this: easy to measure, easy to improve, hard to connect to outcomes. And because they're easy to measure, teams keep measuring them, even when they know that they might not predict anything that actually matters. So here I want to take a brief detour, because sometimes the problem might not be about choosing to track the wrong things. Sometimes your marketing team might be forced to track the wrong things, might be forced to track incomplete metrics because they can't actually access the complete picture. And I want to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to tell you a story about a real customer that I've worked with, a real client. They are leading the marketing department at a large multinational organization. They're super smart, experienced. They're doing the best to run campaigns that support business goals. They manage different agency partners. They're making budget decisions. They report to the C-suite, but they don't have regular access to the internal sales data that would tell them if any of it's actually working. So here's what they can see: traffic, form submissions, content downloads, ad clicks, email opens. But they can't see, without begging, which of those leads actually became customers, the size of the deal, the sales length, the sales cycle length by channel, the cost of customer acquisition, the lifetime value by campaign source. They have to beg for these data, and when they get it, if they get it, it's months or weeks old and not totally complete. So they've got to guess which campaigns drove revenue because no one will allow them to actually see the data that would tell them which campaigns drove revenue. And so you end up, without that outcome data, you end up in this cycle where your marketing team is busy, your reports are showing activity, your campaigns are running, you're publishing content, the machine is humming, but your revenue might be stagnating and no one can connect the dots between what your marketing team is doing and what's actually moving the business. So maybe underperforming work keeps getting funded because without those outcome data, you can't tell what's underperforming. So budget flows to whatever generated the most measurable activity. And that might cause your leadership team to lose confidence, not because the marketing isn't working, but because no one can tell what's working or not working. The data gap creates doubt. And then that doubt leads to trust eroding. Maybe your marketing team feels like they're being blamed for results that they can't measure, they can't see. And your leadership team feels frustrated paying for work that they can't evaluate. And this cycle continues because the fundamental problem, that data access gap, never actually gets addressed. And so it's not about your marketing team making excuses or avoiding accountability. It's what happens structurally when people responsible for outcomes can't see the outcomes they're responsible for. All right, so let's get back on track. What should you measure instead? Let's talk about metrics that actually signal progress. The shift is from did we do something to did something change? And that sounds obvious, but most marketing reports answer the first question and not the second one. Did we do something? Yeah. We published 20 blog posts, ran 8 campaigns, sent 40 emails. Did anything change? I don't know. Or maybe a vague gesture toward lead count. So, metrics you can actually base decisions on. Conversion rate by channel. Not just overall conversion rate, but break it down. How many visitors became leads and how many leads became customers by channel. If organic search converts at 8% and paid social converts at 1.5%, you know where to invest more and where to pull back. Cost per lead by channel. How much are you spending to get a lead from paid search versus organic versus email? If one channel costs $500 a lead and another costs $50 and they convert at similar rates, that's a funding decision just waiting to happen. Revenue by campaign or by channel. So for every dollar you spent on this campaign, how much revenue came back? This is the metric that ends budget arguments. It requires sales data that's tied to source tracking, which means that your CRM and your analytics all need to be connected properly. How about time from lead to close by source or by channel? So how long does it take a lead from organic search to close compared to a lead from a trade show, for example? Faster velocity often means a better fit, and it helps you forecast your pipeline with more confidence. So these metrics aren't complicated conceptually, but they do require some infrastructure. You need source tracking in place. You need marketing and sales data that are connected on the back end. You need someone who can pull those reports that tie campaign activity to close deals. And if you don't have that infrastructure, building that is the actual work, not just picking better metrics. So here's how you know if a metric is actually a KPI. It connects to business outcomes within just a couple of steps. You can draw a straight line from metric to revenue, customer acquisition, retention, whatever your business is actually trying to accomplish. If you need 3 layers of explanation to connect a metric to an outcome, it's probably not actually a KPI. Leadership makes budget decisions based on it. If that number drops, someone's asking hard questions or moving money around. If that metric can tank and nothing changes about how you allocate resources, it's not driving anything. It's not a KPI. Maybe your finance team notices when it moves. Your finance team doesn't care about clicks or downloads, But they do care about those numbers that affect your P&L at the end of the year. If your CFO would look at this metric and understand why it matters without needing an explanation, that's probably a KPI. If you can explain it to executive leadership in one sentence, no footnotes, no asterisks, well, if you understand the attribution model, if you need a preamble to defend why the metric matters, it's not a KPI. These tests work regardless of your industry and your business model. The specific metrics change, but the criteria pretty much stay the same. And the one big test for is this a KPI is if it improved by 20%, would it change your strategy? Would you change your budget allocation? Would you double down on that channel? Would you shift resources away from something else to put there? If yes, you're looking at a metric that actually matters. If you would just file that under nice to have, then it's not a KPI. It's just color and context in your dashboard. And so why is this number 20% and not 50% or 120%? Well, 20% is a realistic, measurable improvement. That's something that might actually happen without needing a miracle. But if you wouldn't change anything for a 20% gain, it's probably just a vanity metric. So let's talk about implementation. You know what to measure. You know how to test whether a metric matters. You know the right questions to ask. The hard part is building the infrastructure to actually track this stuff. You need source tracking that's consistent across platforms. You need marketing and sales data that are connected so you can see the full path from campaign to closed deal. And you need someone who can reconcile those data when the numbers don't line up. And as someone who works on a team who does a lot of analytics, I can tell you that those numbers don't often line up perfectly. So that's analytics work. It's tedious. It requires someone who understands both the marketing side and the sales side and can spot where that story breaks down. And most marketing teams don't actually have the bandwidth or the technical expertise to do that work. And most organizations don't realize how much expertise it takes until they try to do it themselves and it doesn't work. So here are the things that you can do this week. Number one, audit your KPIs. Run each one through the test. Would a 20% change or would a 20% gain change your strategy? If no, maybe stop tracking it. Two, map metrics to outcomes. Draw literal lines from metrics you report to revenue to customer acquisition or retention. If you can't draw that line in one or two pretty clear steps, you might just be measuring activity. Three, identify your infrastructure gaps. Do you have source tracking in place? Can you connect marketing campaigns to close deals on the back end? Do you have someone on your team who can do that reconciliation work? If step 3 exposes gaps that you can't close internally, that's useful information because you can't fix what you don't acknowledge. So just to give you a little sneak peek, after this presentation, you will get an email with a download that will help guide you through the exercises that we talked about in the presentation today. And of course, if you have any questions about anything I talked about or anything in that download, you can feel free to reach out. You can always reach us at sales@forefront.us or our website is forefront.us. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm Leah Hart. That's a great place to connect with me if you have questions. But thank you for being here. And yeah, hi, Ben.
Hey, Leah. For some reason, my camera has stopped working, but I am here. Can you hear me okay?
I can see you and hear you. It helps when I don't mute myself.
Okay. Well, I can't see myself. Interesting. Anyway, that was great. If anybody's wondering, we did record this, and that will be coming out on our YouTube channel. And I think in that email follow-up as well. A couple of things, and if anybody has questions, please drop them in now. Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. But some things that I took away, I really liked your points about vanity metrics versus like real KPIs. some questions that I think were really useful were, would a 20% gain change our strategy? And kind of the inverse being like, would a similar drop cause a hard conversation or a budget change, which is really interesting. And then the 3 takeaways were audit your KPIs, map your KPIs to revenue or acquisition targets. And then third is identify and fix gaps in your data. It sounds like a lot of people are probably looking at specific people in their organization and begging them for that data. So maybe that's part of the fix you have to work on.
Yeah, I think based on our work with clients, we've seen that a lot. We're like, they're tracking the right things and they have all the information, but they're not speaking to each other. They're kind of tracked in 2 separate systems. So I think that's going to be a big gap, probably for a lot of folks, is making sure that all of their data are connected in a useful way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always a challenge. If you have the right tools and the right team, it seems like it's always a challenge we can overcome. All right, great. Well, I'm not seeing any questions, so I think with that, we will wrap it up and keep it nice and short. Oh, one question. Thanks, Brandon. So what are some ways you define KPIs with your clients before building out the infrastructure? It's a great question. Do you have thoughts on that, Leah?
Yeah, so it can happen a few different ways. When I'm talking to a client, I try to get really clear with them on what actually moves the bottom line for them. So, for example, if they're really interested in just getting people into their database so they can connect with them via email, just building their audience, and that's really what they're focusing on, then we can kind of build their KPIs out from there to support those goals. Or if we're working with, for example, a client in higher education, of course, they're looking at enrollments. So, okay, we define the enrollments. We say, how many are you looking for this program, for example? And then you can kind of reverse engineer the KPIs that show progress toward that goal and also are directly connected to it. So it really relies on being clear on what actually matters to your business. And again, you might be surprised how many folks can't say like, oh, what we really need is sales of this specific product, or sales in this region, or enrollments in this program, or new customers using this specific product line. So getting really clear on what the goals are inside of the business and what's going to really move your bottom line, and then you can reverse engineer your KPIs from there.
Very cool. It reminds me of like root cause analysis, asking why like 5 times until you get to the actual, oh, this is what actually matters.
Exactly.
Cool. Thanks, Brandon. Great question. All right. Well, we're about at the hour, so I want to say thanks again. Look out for that email recording and stay in touch. Also, be sure to follow Leah on LinkedIn or connect with her. She's always putting out similar great wisdom. So that's a great way to keep in touch as well. Any final thoughts, Leah?
Thank you, Ben. No, just thank you everyone for your time. And please reach out if you have any questions, and keep an eye on your email inbox for the replay and that download that I was talking about.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Leah. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.